In 2009, there was a man in our small town who took his own life. His name was Kenneth Leap. He was an artist and so much more. He had smiling eyes. That is what I remember most about him. I really did not know him very well, but those shining eyes and his smile are etched in my memory. We had a couple of guitar lessons together with his son Christopher. Those two shined like the sun together. There is such a great intelligence in that family. I continued guitar lessons with Christopher after his dad was gone. Ken's wife, Regina, became one of my meditation partners. When Ken died, I found myself wandering and wondering. All I knew of this man was his smile. Later, I discovered that he had struggled deeply with his mental health for a very long time. In those days after Ken's death, I pledged to myself that I would always find another way. I promised to myself that I would always reach out for help when the darkness came. I have been true to that promise. I have studied, I have put myself in service, I have joined churches and spiritual programs, I have been to 2 mental health treatment facilities and 1 psychiatric unit. I have opened my heart to forgiveness and compassion on levels unknown to me before. I've been to therapy, I have done my best to cultivate supportive community. I have exhausted my rational and mystical minds many, many times in this process. 2 years ago, my younger brother took his own life. His name was Kyle. His death helped me to make a deeper commitment to what now feels like a responsibility to live. I have a responsibility to honor all of those who have sown into my life. I have a responsibility to my children. I have a responsibility to rise above the heaviness that seems to press so strongly on some of us. My commitment to this process is now made manifest in the more than 600 videos that are accessible on my Travelin' Trav YouTube channel. Labor and the expression of worth is the resulting culture that I believe is worthy of brand marketing. Please check out the playlists that I have compiled so that you can make some sense of my vast archive of material. I've tried to arrange the playlists in such a way that they might be a helpful context along your developmental process. If my life is to function, in some sense, as a cautionary tale, then I believe that it is important that a more complete version of the tale be told. Please allow me to demonstrate the level of commitment that has been required for me to become such a ridiculous failure. I know in myself a very cautious nature, overly cautious perhaps, in this physical world. For instance, when I played baseball as a kid, I always had a really difficult time fielding a hot grounder for fear that the ball was going to jump up and hit me in the face. And when Darren Andrews started pitching that ball up at around 50 or 60 miles per hour in 4th grade, I no longer wanted to stand in that batter's box. Heights are a problem for me too. Those of us who free solo those mountain faces, hundreds, thousands of feet above the ground, those folks are true gurus to me. I cannot imagine the discipline that it must take to trust one's body and mind on such a precarious perch. In football, I was equally useless. I got caught in the backfield after I'd received a reverse. It was Scott Sedgwick that day who took me down so hard that I literally saw stars. It took some time to find my breath. I have a friend, Brian. He's a wrestler, a star wrestler in school, and now his kids have carried on with the tradition. Combat sports, he calls it. I have great respect for the combat sport guys. I like to watch the diverse and many ways that a human might choose to enter into the combat arena. Some of us choose blustery arrogance, and it seems to work sometimes. Some of us choose calm humility. I never really developed a healthy sense of competition as a young person. At some point in my development, I realized that I wasn't competing because I was afraid of losing or looking dumb or weak. With that knowledge of myself, I began to engage more fully. I found things that I wanted, and I went after them more. That process left me learning to deal with disappointment. Turns out I was given a lot of things, and I never properly learned how to pursue the things I wanted. I had a lot of natural talent and even sometimes charisma, That charisma opened a lot of doors, but there was a toughness that I had neglected in myself. This lack of toughness and mental discipline, low pain tolerance, and a victimization complex all added up to a lot of suffering. I beat myself up for years like this, and I did a lot of things to try to learn from those people who seemed to me to have the toughness that I felt like I lacked. I found myself working on a freight dock among strong men and clanging metal. I studied under Dan Clark, my ex-father-in-law, a man who grew up eating tough for breakfast. I went to Army basic training, I went to the police academy, I got 2 college degrees. My own father, when I was young, tried to teach me to be tough too. In fact, my lack of toughness seemed to be a point of shame for him. I can understand why. As I said before, it's all understandable. I can get pretty hard on myself sometimes, like I said. While it may seem that I'm not quite tough enough, it may be that I am just a highly sensitive person. We all know that pain is a purely subjective experience. In other words, pain is all in our mind. Is it possible that people who have a high pain tolerance are just not feeling the pain? My work as a licensed physical therapist assistant in the state of New Mexico has prompted a lot of thought on this subject of pain and sensitivity and our response to pain stimulus. I've read that emotional pain and physical pain register very similarly in our brains. My friend, Brian, the star wrestler, he was the one who first told me that pain was an illusion. This wasn't just a belief that he was trying to impart to me. This statement was born from moments when he had to push through the pain and all the fear responses that pain brings about. Have you ever done something that intentionally brought pain or discomfort into your life? Have you ever immersed yourself in a cold stream or a cold shower? Have you ever stepped away from the security of warmth, even if just for a moment? Have you stepped away with intention? Exercise is like this to us a lot. We say pain is weakness leaving the body. Brian, the wrestler, he had discovered for himself that victory was what his pain was hiding. And he knew that he was a victor. And so he saw through that pain, and also through defeat, and into his victory. When Brian saw stars in the backfield, he got right up and went back to the huddle. It is understandable why some of us understand those things and others don't. I admire athletes, the devotion, the precision, the aspiration to greatness, the willingness to push through the pain, the drive to win, to be the best one can possibly be. My father tried to teach me his brand of tough. It worked for him, but it would not be communicated to me. My father's brand of tough made me feel small and weak. It seemed like he was trying to get me to buy into a religion that he didn't even believe. My father was not a religious man, but he certainly had a self-righteous pulpit. I do not want my father to suffer. I do not want him to be dishonored. I do want everyone in our family to get the help that they need. My father and mother, my children, my ex-wives, and my girlfriends. My brother's suicide, nearly 2 years ago, helped me to understand the need for all of us to come together and heal. When I met my brother's son for the first time, Martu, and I met Martu's mother, Nadia, a great hope arose in me that we could all be found together. I could be very critical of myself for the speed at which Nadia and I went for this dream, but I'm not going to do that today. We did all that we could, but in the end, as a family, we did not have the depth of collective wisdom to move that situation forward. It was very disappointing and painful. I can speak more about this in detail later. My brother's suicide brought me into full contact with that generational suffering that seems to torment so many of us now. After I married Nadia, I went to work for Brian, the wrestler, in his t-shirt shop. I spent myself there at his t-shirt conveyor belt. I gave it my all. After 4 months at his t-shirt shop, there was no way I could continue while maintaining my integrity. That t-shirt shop got up to 107 degrees that summer. Brian is a firefighter. He walks into burning buildings with a firefighting suit, breathing through a respirator. Temperature is all in our minds too, right? I went to my friend for a job so that I could support my new family. I told myself I would not quit. I made promises, hoping that my absolute effort combined with God's unfailing grace would result in a victory. I went to work for the man who had first told me that fear and pain have no substance. I went to work for him, resolved that I would never stop pushing. 4 months later, I had some money in the bank. I'd been living rent-free by the generosity of another brother, Chris. I'll get to him later too. So I had some money in the bank. It had been 4 months since I'd seen my wife, Nadia. I went to Argentina as planned, having just quit my job, which was not the plan. I just quit my job working for Brian at Inkling Design, the wrestler who told me I could see through my pain. I still believe that it is possible. In Argentina, my strong verbal practice was greatly limited by my elementary capacity to receive and broadcast the Spanish language. In this somewhat hamstrung state, I began to see very clearly a deep suffering that was present between Nadia and her 2 boys. There was so much hurt, and there I was, a new stepfather who had never met one of my stepsons, Joaquin, Nadia's 11-year-old son. I employed all of my people-pleasing and peacemaking skills with my very limited language. There was a volatility with Joaquin, and I certainly did not want to make it any worse. In order to not make waves or cause disturbance, I surrendered to Nadia's will. It happened subtly, yet quickly, as I attempted to integrate into the household by showing that I respected the house rules and the mother who was still the head of this house. What I witnessed in myself in this situation was a great compromise in my own integrity. I saw myself sacrificing my own integrity in order to make peace. I saw myself becoming subservient, and it was all by choice. It was like putting a magnifying glass up to my lifetime behavior. It was the same unholy sacrifice that I had made in my first marriage. It was the surrender of my power. It was the surrender of my masculine strength. It was shameful. It was weak. I came back from Argentina ailing. As an act of self-preservation, I increased my video production efforts, and I allowed this project that I call Labor and the Expression of Worth to form in my vision. On November 23rd, I posted a video called Travelin' Trav, Henry David Thoreau's Quiet Desperation. Thoreau says, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. From the desperate city, you go into the desperate country and have to console yourself with the bravery of minks and muskrats. A stereotype but unconscious despair is concealed even under what are called the games and amusements of mankind. There is no play in them, for this comes after work. But it is characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things." Nadia and Martu returned to the U.S. in March of 2022, 4 months since my visit to them. Joaquin decided to stay with his father. I went back to work. Chris Moore made room for me at his real estate agency. For approximately 4 months, I applied myself to the business of real estate with my greatest intensity. On September 20th, I posted a video called Managing Bipolar 1. This was the day that I had pushed myself in the real estate business to my final breaking point. I could no longer function in that office atmosphere. My own personal practice could not be held within the bounds of a real estate office. It was on September 21st of 2022 that I turned to my practice. It is now this practice which must sustain me, for it is my devotion to this practice which grounds me to loving reality. Travis has exhausted himself countless times in the paid work environment. He has been employed in a wide range of activities. He has devoted himself to the learning process in every situation in which he has found himself. He has given himself to the teachings of the armed forces and the police. He has earned 2 college degrees, one of which gained him the privilege of practicing in the institutionalized healing art of physical therapy. I've done blue-collar labor. I've done white-collar labor. I dug ditches, I've taught in classrooms, I've plowed fields, I've operated a forklift, a backhoe, and a dump truck. I've been a maintenance man and a carpenter's assistant. I've worked in music stores. I've played music in bars and on the streets as a licensed street performer. I am immensely grateful for all of this experience and everything that I have learned from all of this. Thanks to all of you who have invested so much into my personal progression. As I mentioned before, when I was in Argentina, I discovered in myself a sick, sad, pitiful, and compromised man. This vision of how I had been presenting myself in this world was truly an awakening. You may see in my videos after March of 2022 a theme. I was making a stand against the shame that I thought was love. Do you recall how I have mentioned before that my brother wanted to talk to me about shame? Several times during my stay with him in Denver, in the months before he took his own life, he mentioned to me that he wanted to talk about shame. Little brother was giving us a clue. There is a video that I posted on January 31st, 2022. It's called Labor and the Expression of Worth, Symbols and Assembly. It is in this video that I am fully confronting this shame that was given in the place of love. For those of us who have made the terrible mistake of placing ourselves in service to shaming voices, it has been a long journey. It has been difficult sometimes to take the next step. I am sure that it has also been difficult to watch. I believe that this personal stand that I am making now is very important, not just for me, but for all of us. When a man comes to the end of his capacity to function within the norms of society, it is imperative that he finds a way to be relevant and find support for the work that he does. Labor and the Expression of Worth is the office to which I go to work every day. Labor and the Expression of Worth is the practice that sustains me. It is the work I do. It is represented by a body of online work that is available to you. Labor and the Expression of Worth is the testament of one man who struggles. It is the story of a man who is learning to drop the details of his suffering that do not contribute to the healing of himself and others. Travelin' Trav is a singer, songwriter, poet, essayist, metaphysical therapist, teacher, healer, father, and an advocate for the homeless and neurodivergent. He is an encourager, a deeply flawed human being, and a somewhat reluctant, yet grateful, follower of the one that we have called Jesus. Trav's working practice is now an integration of his diverse career experiences, which includes time in the military, police, academia, and physical therapy. His personal journey to overcome genetically inherited trauma makes him an expert on mental health issues and trauma recovery. Humanity is making the leap into the non-dual. We are moving beyond the binary into a more fluid state. This is evident in our most recent explorations of gender identification. In the depths of Christ, there is no male or female. Travelin' Trav is developing educational materials which encourage the alignment of our rational and mystical senses. These educational tools will help us to manage this species-wide transition in our consciousness. Together, we are developing a new language to describe this caramelized, dystopian world in which we live. Because we are stumbling toward our next evolutionary threshold, we must learn to both sing the blues and transcend the oppression that inspired the blues in the first place. We rise above our tendency to manifest as either the oppressed or the oppressors. Labor and the Expression of Worth is Trav's compassionate philosophical container which creates the necessary inner space to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously. Labor and the Expression of Worth is a context in which we may align our work with one another around our deepest common values. We must educate, strengthen, and encourage one another. Strengthening a tribe member deepens a tribe. Deep tribes can feed the world. It is essential that the consciousness level of our species is deepened. We need a new perspective from which to solve the diverse and many problems that humanity has created for itself. In order to raise our consciousness, we must encourage deep communication between the generations. Trav is reaching out to the generations who came before him and after him. Thank you for supporting Travelin' Trav by contributing monthly through Patreon. Every little bit helps. May we discover our deepest common values together and align our efforts appropriately. The future of our species depends on it. Strengthening a tribe member deepens a tribe. Depth tribes feed the world. Sincerely, Travis Irwin.